All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Where we like to take things that you've shared with us and kind of pull them apart
And
and
dig in.
and see what's really going on. And today we have something pretty interesting.
We do.
It's a bill, right? It's proposed legislation.
That's right.
It's HR 43.
That's 43, yep.
And the full title is pretty interesting too.
Yeah, it is. Definitely gives you a good sense of what it's all about.
Yeah. Alaska Native Village Municipal Lands Restoration Act of 2025.
Yeah, so looking at what you've shared with us here,
Yeah.
the text of the bill,
Yeah.
our goal today is to really break down what's at the core of this bill.
Yeah.
What's its purpose? How's it looking to change things up, especially for Alaska Native villages and any potential municipal corporations?
Right.
We want to get beyond just the words themselves and look at what the impact could actually be.
Right, and I'm noticing in the title the word restoration. What do you think that suggests?
Yeah, that's a great observation. I mean, that word restoration implies that something was maybe in place before,
Right.
and now they're revisiting it, right? So the main change this bill wants to make is to the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act.
ANCSA.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
And it's specifically about this requirement that village corporations had to transfer land for setting up municipal corporations.
Okay.
The bill's goal, as it says, is to change ANCSA so that these village corporations are no longer required to hand over that land in trust to the state of Alaska to create these municipalities.
So under the old ANCSA, these village corporations had to give up this land managed by the state, and that was all tied to these potential municipal corporations that might pop up in the area.
That's the heart of it, yeah.
Yeah.
This bill aims to get rid of that requirement.
That's
It's like shifting who has the control,
Yeah,
It goes from you have to do this to you have the option.
right.
And that is a big change for how land could be managed in these areas. And that's where the restoration comes in. It's like giving the power back to the village corporations when it comes to these land decisions.
Gotcha. So we know that ANCSA is like the big important law about land in Alaska.
Yeah.
Do we know which specific part of it this bill is messing with?
Yes, it's very specific. HR 43 changes Section 14C of ANCSA,
Okay.
which is officially 43 USC 1613C if you're looking it up. This part is all about how village corporations transfer land. So any change to this section has a big impact on the original deal of ANCSA.
So it's really going right to the source of how land is dealt with under ANCSA.
Exactly.
Now, the bill also mentions some technical amendments. Is that something we need to really dive into today?
To get the big picture what this bill is trying to do,
Yeah.
we don't really need to get lost in the weeds of those technical amendments. They're more about making sure the law is super precise and clear. It's stuff like renumbering paragraphs, fixing the indents so it's easier to read, and updating references within that specific section. For example, it might change Section 14C of this act, simply this subsection, just to be extra clear.
Okay.
Important for lawyers, but it doesn't change the main goal of the bill for our chat today.
Okay, so it sounds like the biggest deal here is moving away from making land transfer mandatory.
Yeah.
But let's go back to that word restoration.
Okay.
You mentioned it might be about giving more control back to the villages. Is there anything else specific in the bill about that?
Absolutely. The restoration part really comes out when we look at a new section this bill adds about giving back certain land that was put in a trust for Alaska.
Okay.
This is where things get interesting because it tries to undo some past land transfers, but only in specific cases.
Land that's already in a trust going back, that's a big deal.
It is.
Can you walk us through what land this is and how it could go back to the village corporation?
This part applies to situations where a village corporation, before this bill is supposed to become law, which is April 7, 2025, gave land to the state in trust to set up a municipal corporation. But here's the catch. By that date, that municipal corporation hasn't actually been formed yet.
So they gave up the land thinking something would happen, and
Right.
it just didn't.
Exactly. So in those cases, if the village corporation and the people living in the native village both agree, they can officially ask to end the trust.
Okay.
And the bill says that trust has to be dissolved and the land goes back to the village corporation.
Wow. So it's like a rewind button
Yeah, kind of.
for those situations where the municipality never came to be.
Exactly.
But are there any catches to this? If the land goes back, does the village corporation have to take on any responsibilities?
There are a few important things to keep in mind.
Okay.
The bill mentions subsection G of ANCSA when talking about this land going back. So any valid existing rights that were created by the trust still stay in effect, even if the land changes hands.
Okay, so it's not a completely clean break.
Right.
Any legal stuff tied to the land stays put.
Exactly. On top of that, any easements, rights of way for public roads, or rights of way for people who have valid existing rights, those all stay too.
So basically, people can still get to where they need to go.
Yeah.
Essential access is protected.
Exactly. Think about those public roads, right? Those need to stay open.
Right.
And anyone who already has a right to use the land can still do so.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Now, what about the state? They were managing this land before, right? What happens to their responsibilities?
The bill's clear about that too. The village corporation has to take over any obligations the state had because of the trust.
So they inherit the state's to-do list, basically.
Pretty much. If there are any leases or agreements on that land from when the state was in charge,
Yeah.
the village corporation has to handle those now.
Wow. So it's like a package deal.
It is.
They get the land back,
Right.
but they also get the paperwork.
Exactly. They get the land.
Right.
But they also have to deal with any agreements or leases that are already in place.
Gotcha. So just to recap on this reversion thing, it's for land that was put in trust before April 7, 2025, for a municipal corporation that was never created.
Right.
If both the village corporation and the villagers agree, they can say, we want that land back, and it goes back to the village corporation. But they have to honor existing rights, easements, and take over the state's responsibilities.
Exactly. You got it.
Perfect. Now, the bill also talks about what happens in the future with these potential municipal corporations.
Right.
This no future requirement part. What's that all about?
It's pretty simple, but really important.
Okay.
From the day this bill becomes law, village corporations are no longer required to give any more land to the state for setting up municipal corporations.
Okay, so even if there's talk of a new municipal corporation near a village corporation,
Sure.
that village corporation can decide if they want to give up land for it. It's
Sure.
their choice.
It is. It's all about giving the village corporations more power to decide what happens to their land.
Gotcha.
You mentioned earlier about the possible downsides of that old rule.
Right.
Well, imagine a village corporation that wanted to use that land for something else,
Yeah.
something that helps their community in the long run.
Right.
Or maybe the municipality that was planned didn't really fit what the village wanted. This change lets them put their own needs first.
That's a good point. Yeah. The outline also mentions something about defining a sale and some things about net revenues and minimum acreage. How do those fit in?
Those parts are actually about clarifying things that are already in Section 14C of ANCSA.
Okay.
The bill's just making them clearer, not adding anything brand new.
Okay.
For example, it clarifies the definition of sale by saying that when it comes to giving land for things like community expansion, sale means transferring up to 1,280 acres.
Okay.
That was already in ANCSA. The bill's just restating it. Same with the net revenues and minimum acreage stuff. Those are part of ANCSA's rules about giving land for community needs.
Okay.
The bill just tweaks the wording a bit, probably to make it easier to read and match the main change about that mandatory land transfer.
Okay.
But the basic rules about how much money comes from the transferred land and the minimum size of that land, those stay pretty much the same.
So it seems like the main goal of HR 43 is getting rid of that rule where village corporations had to give land for future municipal corporations. And it also sets up a way for land that was already given away to come back under certain conditions.
Yes.
The other stuff is just cleaning up the language of ANCSA to go with this main change.
Exactly. The technical stuff and those clarifications about sale, net revenues, and minimum acreage, they all support that core shift.
Now, it's important to note that this bill already passed the House of Representatives on February 4, 2025.
You're right, it did.
So it's moving along in the process.
Yeah, it's a big step. It means the House is taking this issue seriously.
Right. All right. So for our listeners out there, the main takeaway from our look at HR 43 is that this bill, if it becomes law, would really change how land is handled between Alaska Native village corporations and the state when it comes to setting up these municipal corporations.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be a requirement for village corporations to give up land anymore.
Right.
It would be their choice. And there's a way for land that was already given away to possibly come back to the village corporation under certain conditions.
You got it.
This change in how land is managed could have a ripple effect on a lot of things.
It could.
Local governments, economic development in these villages,
For sure.
and even the relationship between Alaska Native communities and the state.
It's really about giving more control back to the village corporations over something really important, their land.
That's a really good point, and it makes me wonder about what might happen if this bill does become law. What could be the good and the bad outcomes of this change for Alaska Native villages and the state as a whole? Think about how it could affect long-term plans, building infrastructure, and even the balance of power between local control and the state government. It's definitely something to keep watching as this bill goes through the process.